Beneath the endless stretch of desert sky, where the winds whispered secrets that no man could claim, a story began with a question. What would you guard if no one remembered your name? Long ago, travelers spoke of treasures buried beneath dunes that shifted like waves of the sea. But there was one tale, softer and rarer, of a lamp hidden deep under the sand. A lamp not for riches, but for silence, watched over by one who swore never to speak again. They called him the Silent Guard, a figure as forgotten as the lamp he protected. Was he a man, a spirit, or just a shadow in the desert? No one could answer. Only the sand knew. Our story begins in the bustling heart of a desert city, where survival meant quick hands and sharper wits. The bazaar brimmed with the cries of merchants, spices burning with saffron heat, fabrics glowing like sunset, and dates so sweet they clung to your teeth. Among the crowd, a boy named Farid darted, weaving between men carrying sacks of grain and women balancing clay jars on their heads. Farid was 17, with eyes sharper than most, not from education but from hunger. His father had once been a guard at the palace gates, a proud man who believed in honor more than gold. But when sickness struck, honor could not buy medicine, and the man's sword was sold piece by piece until nothing remained. Farid had grown up on that memory. That dignity alone could not feed a family. Now Farid carried baskets for coins, scrubbed clay floors for copper, and sometimes cheated weights on a scale when his mother wasn't watching. Every grain of rice counts, he told himself, though deep down he felt the shame. His mother, Layla, worked endlessly mending torn clothes of richer families, and his younger sister, Noura, spent her days chasing goats for neighbors who never paid her in more than stale bread. Together, they scraped by. Yet, despite it all, Farid often stared beyond the bazaar's gates, out toward the desert. The horizon was wide, and in its silence he felt both trapped and free. One evening, after hauling water until his back ached, Farid overheard two old men at the edge of the market. They spoke in hushed tones about a lamp, one buried not far from the city, a lamp cursed with silence. "They say it is guarded," whispered one, his teeth yellow and worn. "Guarded by a man who made a vow never to speak again. He waits watching beneath the dunes." The others scoffed. "Bah, a story for children. Who buries power in sand? Thieves would have found it long ago." Still, the first leaned closer. "Not all treasures are meant for thieves." Farid carried the words with him that night. In their one-room home, while his sister slept curled against his mother, Farid lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. He thought of the lamp, of the silent guard, and of his father's words. A man's worth is measured by what he protects, not what he gains. He had once dismissed those words as useless, but now they burned in him like an ember refusing to die. Perhaps this lamp was more than a story. Perhaps it was a chance to change everything. The next morning, Farid rose before the call of prayer and slipped quietly from the house. He took with him a flask of water, half a loaf of bread, and his father's worn leather belt, the last thing they had not sold. He walked past the bazaar, past the city walls, into the breathless desert where the sand swallowed sound. Hours turned into heat, and his lips cracked under the sun's fire. Just as his legs trembled with exhaustion, he saw it. Not the lamp, but a figure. A man stood on a dune, tall and still, dressed in robes the color of ash. His face was hidden, his hands clasped around a staff. He said nothing, only watched. Farid's heart pounded. "Are you?" His voice faltered. The figure gave no reply. Silence stretched, pressing heavy on Farid's chest. He wanted to turn back, but something in the man's stillness held him. Slowly, Farid stepped closer. His foot sank into softer sand, and there, half buried at the man's feet, glimmered a curve of bronze. A lamp. The boy reached down. The moment his fingers brushed the metal, the air shifted. The desert wind died, and the world grew unbearably quiet. Even his own breath seemed stolen. Farid looked up. The figure's eyes, dark and unblinking, met his. And though the man spoke no words, Farid felt them echo inside his skull. "What will you guard, boy? What will you betray?" Farid's hand trembled as he pulled the lamp free from the sand. It was heavier than he expected, warm as if it had been lying under the sun, though no ray had touched it directly. He brushed the grit away, revealing carvings that wound across the bronze like snakes, symbols he could not read, though they seemed to shift in the corner of his eye. He swallowed hard, and for a moment he considered dropping it back where it belonged. Yet hunger pressed into his ribs, and the thought of his mother's thin wrists and his sister's tired eyes made him hold it tighter. The silent figure did not move, though Farid felt his gaze pressing on him like a mountain. The unspoken question still echoed in his head. What will you guard? What will you betray? He wanted to answer, but no words rose. Instead, he shoved the lamp into the folds of his tunic and turned toward the city. The figure neither followed nor stopped him. Only the wind returned, whispering across the dunes. By the time Farid stumbled back into the city walls, the sun was sinking, painting the sky in bruised colors. He collapsed near a water seller's stall, gulping down stolen drops as though he might drown in thirst. No one noticed the lamp hidden against his chest. The bazaar carried on. Merchants haggled, guards shouted, children darted under carts, as if the world had not shifted. But to Farid, everything felt sharper, heavier, as if the lamp pulsed with every heartbeat. That night, as his family ate bread so hard it scraped their gums, Farid placed the lamp before them. His sister's eyes widened. "It's beautiful," Noura whispered, reaching to touch it. Layla pulled her hand back gently. "Where did you get this?" Her voice was firm, tired but laced with fear. Farid hesitated. He did not want to lie, but he could not tell the full truth. "I found it in the desert," he said. "It could be worth enough to pay our debts." His mother studied him, then the lamp. Something dark flickered across her face. Not greed, but memory. "Objects found in the desert are never free," she murmured. "Your father once told me that some treasures cost more than they give." She tried to push it away, but Farid caught her hand. "We have nothing left. This is our chance." His words cracked louder than he intended. Noura flinched. Silence fell over them, thicker than the desert night. Later, when his mother and sister slept, Farid sat alone with the lamp. He turned it in his hands, tracing the carvings. His breath fogged against the bronze, and for a heartbeat the lines glowed faintly, like embers beneath ash. His chest tightened. Slowly, almost against his will, he rubbed it. At first, nothing. Then the air grew heavy, dense, as though the room had sunk underwater. Shadows quivered on the walls, gathering in the corners, pulling together into the shape of a man. Not a towering giant of smoke nor a beast of flame, but a thin, weary figure cloaked in darkness, his face lined with years beyond counting. His eyes glimmered faintly, not cruel, not kind, but piercing. Farid gasped and nearly dropped the lamp. The figure raised a hand, not in threat but in silence. His voice came not from his lips but from the air itself, heavy and resonant. "I am no genie of wishes. I am bound to guard until another chooses to take the vow. You, boy, have broken silence. Now the choice is yours." Farid's skin prickled. "I don't understand," he whispered. The figure's form wavered like smoke in wind. "The lamp is not a gift. It is a burden. Its keeper swears silence, becomes the unseen shield of this land. Wealth, power, comfort, these will never be yours, only duty. Guard or betray, choose, and the desert will remember." Farid's mouth dried. He thought of his mother, bent with work. He thought of Noura's laughter fading into weariness. Was he to give up his voice, his life, for a burden no one would see or praise? Or was he to betray this vow, sell the lamp, and finally give his family a chance to breathe? The choice clawed at him, heavier than hunger. Before he could answer, the shadow faded, melting back into the lamp. The room fell still, only the faint whistle of night wind creeping through the cracks. Farid sat motionless, clutching the lamp to his chest, torn between two worlds, one of silence, one of survival. Sleep never came. At dawn, as the first call to prayer echoed across the city, Farid rose with aching bones and a restless heart. The lamp still pulsed faintly, as if it were waiting, as if it already knew what he would decide. Farid carried the lamp out into the morning light, keeping it hidden beneath a worn cloth. The city was stirring awake, merchants yawning as they set out their goods, beggars gathering at the gates, guards marching with heavy spears. Life went on, blind to the storm inside his chest. He thought of selling the lamp at the bazaar, imagining the weight of gold coins falling into his hands, enough to buy bread, medicine, perhaps even freedom. But the memory of the silent figure's eyes stopped him cold. He sat near the old fountain where pigeons bathed in shallow water. His friend Hamid, a potter's apprentice, spotted him. "Farid, you vanish like smoke these days," Hamid said, slapping his shoulder. "What trouble are you brewing now?" Farid forced a smile. "No trouble, just thinking." But Hamid's eyes were sharp. "You found something." Farid shifted uneasily, clutching the cloth tighter. "And if I did?" he asked. Hamid lowered his voice. "Then sell it before someone else takes it from you. You know how the palace is. The Sultan's men sniff out every coin not theirs. If it's valuable, hide it, use it quick." Those words struck Farid with weight. Hamid was right. The city was no place for secrets. Already rumors twisted through alleys like smoke. By noon, whispers of a boy returning from the desert with a strange object reached the ears of men who served the palace. Farid noticed 2 guards watching him from across the square, their eyes sharp as blades. That night he returned home tense and silent. His mother sensed it. "You are walking with a storm in your eyes," she said softly. "What burden have you taken on, my son?" Farid looked at her, his throat tight. He wanted to tell her everything, but fear held his tongue. Instead, he asked, "Mother, do you believe some treasures are meant to be guarded, not spent?" She studied him, then nodded slowly. "Yes, some things carry curses heavier than gold, but sometimes, my son, the curse is not in the treasure itself, but in the choice it forces us to make." That night, Farid tried again. He lit a small oil lamp and sat before the bronze one. He whispered, "If you are real, speak to me again." The bronze shivered in his hands. The air thickened, and once more the shadowy figure emerged, silent until Farid's breath faltered. Then the voice came, deep and sorrowful. "You seek an easy path, but the desert has none. Choose, boy. To guard is to surrender your voice, your life of hunger and joy, to silence and watchfulness. To betray is to break the vow, and the lamp will pass from you. But the desert remembers betrayal, and it does not forgive." Farid's heart thudded. "Why me?" he demanded. His voice cracked with frustration. "I am no warrior, no scholar, no prince. Why burden me with this choice?" The figure's eyes glowed faintly. "Because only the hungry understand the weight of bread. Only the poor know the value of guarding. The rich cannot bear silence. They fill the world with their noise. You have known emptiness. Only you can decide what to protect." Farid's throat ached. He thought of his sister's laughter, of his mother's tired hands, of the city's cries for justice no one delivered. Could silence be a gift, or was it a prison? He pressed his palms to his face. "I don't know what to choose," he whispered. The figure leaned closer, its form flickering like smoke in wind. Then wait. But the desert does not wait long. With that, it vanished once more, leaving Farid trembling in the stillness. Days passed. The bazaar grew restless with rumors, and the palace guards prowled like wolves. Twice Farid caught men following him. Hunger gnawed harder than ever, for he dared not sell the lamp, nor let it out of his sight. At night, he dreamt of the silent guard standing over him, patient, watching, waiting for his answer. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Farid saw a procession pass through the city streets. The Sultan himself rode on a jeweled litter, surrounded by guards. At his side, a new advisor, a man with eyes like cold steel, whispered into his ear. This man was Qadir, known for cruelty disguised as wisdom. He had risen quickly in power, and already the poor muttered that their taxes grew heavier because of him. Farid's mother spat on the ground at the sight. "That man is poison," she said. Farid's heart twisted. He thought of the vow of guarding. Perhaps the lamp was not meant for him alone, but for the city, for those who suffered in silence. Perhaps to guard meant more than simply holding a secret. But was he ready to surrender his own voice to protect others? The question burned in him, and the lamp seemed to hum faintly against his chest, waiting. That night, Farid lay awake listening to the slow breaths of his mother and sister. The lamp rested at his side, wrapped in cloth, though he could feel its weight as if it were pressing against his heart. He turned on his mat, restless, until at last he rose and slipped outside. The streets were hushed, the moon hanging like a silver coin above the rooftops. He carried the lamp to the old fountain, the place where the city's noise usually drowned his thoughts. Tonight it was empty, save for the ripple of water and the rustle of pigeons. He unwrapped the bronze, its carvings glimmering faintly in the moonlight. "If you are real," he whispered, "show me what it means to guard. Show me why my voice must be taken." The air stilled. Shadows thickened, pooling in the corners of the fountain until the figure appeared again. This time his form was clearer, less smoke, more flesh. His face was gaunt, eyes hollow with years of silence. He sat on the edge of the fountain as if he had been waiting. "You ask for meaning," the voice echoed, "then listen without words." The world shifted. Farid blinked and suddenly the bazaar surrounded him, yet not as it was, but as if he were invisible, a shadow watching. He saw his mother hunched over her stitching, her fingers bleeding from the needle. He saw Noura chasing goats, stumbling, scraping her knees, no laughter in her face. He saw Hamid, shoulders bent under clay pots, scolded by his master until his eyes burned with humiliation. And he saw the palace, its marble floors glowing with torchlight, its tables laden with feasts while guards shoved beggars from the gates. The figure's voice seeped through the vision. To guard is to see what others ignore, to carry their pain in silence, to be their shield, though they may never know your name. The vision flickered, changing. Farid saw Qadir, the Sultan's advisor, sitting in shadowed chambers, counting coins with a smile that carried no warmth. Behind him, scrolls of tax decrees lay waiting, each stroke of the pen a noose for the poor. Guards stood ready to enforce his will. Farid's chest tightened with anger. "And if I betray this vow?" he asked into the emptiness. The vision darkened. He saw himself selling the lamp, holding sacks of gold. He saw his mother resting, his sister smiling with new clothes. But soon after, the gold brought attention. Thieves crept at night, guards knocked on the door. Neighbors' faces turned jealous, cold. Then fire. The home burned, the gold stolen, his family scattered. Farid screamed, but no sound left his throat. When the vision ended, he was back at the fountain sweating, his breath ragged. The figure's eyes glowed faintly. The desert remembers betrayal. Gold fades. Silence endures. Farid gripped the lamp so hard it dug into his palms. Why silence? Why not strength or wisdom or power? Why steal a man's voice? The figure's gaze pierced him. Because words are the first to be corrupted. Power twists tongues into lies. But silence cannot betray. Only in silence can you guard without temptation. The weight of the truth pressed on Farid. To guard meant sacrifice. His voice, his dreams of ease, even the warmth of his own laughter. To betray meant to feed his family for a season, then doom them to suffering worse than before. Neither choice was easy. Neither left him free. At dawn, he returned home. His mother looked at his face and knew something had shifted. "You have seen something," she said quietly. Farid nodded but did not explain. How could he tell her that soon he might have no words left to speak? That day, the Sultan's men spread through the bazaar, seizing goods, tightening taxes. Farid watched them beat a merchant who refused to pay. He clenched his fists, rage burning in his chest. He thought of the vow, of guarding. Perhaps silence did not mean weakness. Perhaps it meant becoming the shield against men like Qadir. That night, when the city slept, Farid returned to the lamp. He placed both hands upon it, his breath steady, his heart trembling. "If silence is the price," he whispered, then let it be mine. But let my silence guard those who cannot speak for themselves." The lamp pulsed. The figure appeared once more, but this time he bowed his head. "Then you are no longer a boy chasing bread. You are the guard. From this night on, your voice is the city's shield. Your silence will echo longer than any word." The figure stepped forward, touched Farid's forehead, and vanished into him like smoke drawn into flame. The lamp grew cold and still. Farid gasped, but no sound came. His voice was gone. He opened his mouth, but only silence answered. And yet, for the first time, he felt stronger than he ever had. The morning after his vow, Farid woke with a strange calm. His mother called to him asking if he wanted bread, but he could not answer. He touched his throat, panic rising, until he remembered the figure's promise. His voice was gone, yet the silence did not feel empty. It felt alive, as though the desert itself breathed within him. Noura tugged at his sleeve. "Why won't you speak?" she asked, eyes wide. He only smiled faintly and shook his head. His mother studied him for a long while, sorrow deep in her gaze. "Some choices cannot be undone," she murmured. She did not ask again. That day in the bazaar, Farid moved differently. He noticed things he had ignored before. The way guards lingered near stalls waiting for bribes, the desperation in the eyes of women haggling for scraps, the cruel smirk of Qadir's tax collectors as they filled their bags. Farid's silence sharpened his senses. He no longer wasted words. He saw, he listened, he understood. When a guard shoved Hamid to the ground for dropping a pot, Farid stepped between them. The guard sneered. "Move, boy, or you'll join him." Farid said nothing. He only looked, his eyes steady, unyielding. The guard faltered, as if something heavy pressed against him, then spat and walked away. Hamid scrambled up, bewildered. "What was that? You didn't even speak." Farid helped him to his feet, offering only a quiet nod. Word spread quickly. The boy, who no longer spoke, yet stood unafraid before the Sultan's men. Children whispered that he had been touched by the desert. Merchants began to greet him with respect, some slipping him bread or figs in secret. He had no voice, but his silence grew louder than shouts. Meanwhile, Qadir's power thickened. New taxes fell upon the poor, and whispers of rebellion stirred in shadowed alleys. Farid listened to them all, his presence like a shadow at the edge of gatherings. People began to look to him, though he gave no speeches, no promises. It was enough that he listened. It was enough that he stood. One evening, as the bazaar emptied, Farid saw Qadir himself passing in a litter of silk. Their eyes met briefly, Farid steady, Qadir's sharp and suspicious. Qadir leaned toward his guards, muttering. From that night, men began watching Farid more closely. Not long after, 2 guards came to his home. "The Sultan requires your service," one said with false politeness. His mother tried to protest, but they dragged Farid away. He was led through the palace gates, past walls he had only dreamed of crossing. Inside, gold glimmered on every surface, perfumes hung heavy in the air, and laughter from banquet halls echoed like mockery. They brought him before Qadir in a chamber lined with scrolls and coins. The advisor studied him with cold amusement. "So, this is the silent boy," Qadir said. "The people whisper about you. They say your silence carries weight. Tell me, what are you guarding with that empty throat of yours?" Farid said nothing, meeting his gaze. Qadir chuckled. "How convenient. You speak nothing and fools think you are wise. But silence can be broken." He leaned closer, his smile cruel. "If you are loyal to the Sultan, you will serve us. If not, your family will suffer." Farid's fists clenched, but he stayed still. He could not answer, and he would not bow. Qadir's smile faded. "We shall see how long your silence protects you." He waved his hand, and the guards dragged Farid out. Yet as they shoved him into the streets, Farid noticed something. The palace trembled with cracks. Servants whispered, guards muttered, fear simmered. Qadir ruled with terror, but terror always brewed rebellion. Farid walked home beneath the moonlight, his heart heavy yet steady. He had no voice, no weapon, but he had chosen. He would guard, not treasure, not power, but the people who had none. His silence was no prison, it was a shield. And somewhere in the dunes beyond the city, the desert winds shifted, carrying whispers only Farid could hear. The guard has risen again. The weeks that followed tested Farid's vow more than he had ever imagined. His silence became both a shield and a burden. In the bazaar, people looked to him with new respect. Some touched his arm when they passed, as if drawing strength from his presence. But the palace watched too. Spies lingered at the edges of alleys, and guards seemed to appear wherever he went. One afternoon, Farid witnessed a baker dragged from his stall for refusing to pay another round of special taxes. The man's wife wept, clutching her children, while the guards laughed. Farid stepped forward, placing himself between the family and the soldiers. He made no sound, only lifted his chin. Something in his stillness unsettled them. One cursed under his breath, then shoved Farid aside with a rough hand. Yet they left the baker half free, muttering that it wasn't worth the trouble. The family bowed deeply to Farid, tears streaking their faces. For the first time, Farid felt what it meant to be the guard. He could not erase cruelty, but he could bend it, weaken it, shield against it, even if only for moments. His silence carried a weight stronger than steel. Still, Qadir was not blind. Reports of the silent boy who defied soldiers reached his ears daily. In his chambers, he paced like a hawk. "He is no ordinary fool," Qadir snarled. "Silence is dangerous. People fill it with their own hope." His solution was clear: break Farid publicly. Not long after, Farid was seized at the bazaar, dragged before a jeering crowd. He was forced onto the steps of the palace, where Qadir stood in his silks. "Here is your silent hero," Qadir announced, his voice sharp as a blade. "You whisper that his quiet protects you. Let us see what silence brings when the Sultan commands his voice." He leaned close, eyes gleaming. "Speak. One word. Swear loyalty to the Sultan and you live. Remain silent and your family will suffer." The crowd fell into breathless stillness. Farid's mother stood among them, her hands clasped in fear, while Noura bit her lip until it bled. Hamid's eyes pleaded desperately. Farid's throat ached with the urge to speak, to shout, to save them. But deep within, he felt the lamp's memory, the vow carved into his soul. Silence was his shield. Words would betray it. He looked at Qadir, steady and unbroken, and said nothing. The silence grew heavy, pressing on every chest. Some in the crowd lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others felt their hearts blaze. Qadir's smile curdled. "Very well," he hissed. He ordered the guards to strike him down. But as they raised their blades, a gust of desert wind swept across the square. Sand stung their eyes, blinding them. The guards staggered, unable to strike. Murmurs rose from the crowd. The desert protects him. He truly is the guard. Farid stood tall, his silence roaring louder than Qadir's threats. The guards hesitated, unwilling to move against a boy who seemed chosen by the very land. Qadir's fury twisted his face. "Take him away!" he shouted, but the crowd began to press forward, no longer afraid. Women, men, even children stepped closer to Farid, their voices rising. "Leave him! Enough!" For the first time, Qadir felt the crowd's weight shift against him. He retreated, hiding his fear behind sneers. The guards dragged Farid into the palace dungeons, but the people's whispers followed. "The guard is with us. The guard will not fall." In the darkness of his cell, Farid touched the cold stone and closed his eyes. He could not speak, but he prayed in silence that his vow would hold, that his suffering would not be in vain. And far away, buried beneath shifting dunes, the old lamp glowed faintly, as if the desert itself remembered. Farid's days in the dungeon blurred into darkness and stone. Chains bit his wrists, and the only light seeped through a slit high above, where the desert sun painted a thin line across the wall. Yet even in that silence, Farid felt a strange strength. He remembered the figure's words. To guard is to see what others ignore, to be their shield, though they may never know your name. He began to notice the guards. Some jeered, throwing scraps of stale bread. Others, younger and wearier, avoided his gaze, uneasy with the thought of striking a boy who never begged, never cursed, never spoke. One night, as a storm rattled the palace walls, one of them lingered at his cell. "They say the desert wind rose for you," the guard muttered, voice low, "that even sand obeyed your silence." He shook his head, leaving quickly, but Farid knew the seed of doubt had been planted. Above, Qadir grew restless. The people's whispers had not died. Instead, they spread like fire, carried by merchants to nearby villages. The silent guard defied the palace, they said. The desert itself shields him. For every day Farid endured, his legend grew. The silence Qadir hoped to use as weakness became a weapon sharper than his decrees. At last, Qadir demanded an end. "Bring the boy before me," he ordered. "If he will not speak, then he will break before the court." Farid was dragged into the grand hall, its marble floors gleaming with wealth stolen from his people. The Sultan reclined on his throne, a tired old man whose eyes had dulled under Qadir's shadow. Courtiers lined the walls, whispering. The air smelled of rosewater and fear. Qadir stood tall, smiling like a viper. "Here he is," he announced, "the boy who would be a savior. Look at him, thin, silent, powerless. A mute cannot rule. A beggar cannot guard." He turned to Farid. "Swear your loyalty, or your family will be cast into the streets tonight." Farid lifted his eyes to the throne, not to Qadir. The Sultan's gaze met his, weary but searching, as though even he longed for truth in the midst of poison. Farid dropped to his knees, not in surrender, but in offering. He pressed his palm to the ground, then lifted it to his chest, a vow without words. His silence echoed louder than any oath. The court shifted uneasily. Some whispered prayers, others bowed their heads. The Sultan's lips parted, but he said nothing. Qadir's smile cracked. "Enough of this farce," he roared. "He is no prophet, no savior. He is a danger. End him." "End." The guards stepped forward, but their hands trembled. The youngest among them lowered his spear. "I will not," he said. Another followed. "Nor I." Murmurs swelled through the hall, a ripple of defiance. Qadir's face blanched. He turned to the Sultan, desperate. "Order them!" The old ruler raised a shaking hand, but not toward Farid. His eyes burned with something that had long been buried, a spark of courage. "Enough, Qadir," the Sultan said, his voice thin but firm. "You have poisoned this court for too long." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Qadir staggered, disbelief twisting into rage. "You dare defy me? You are nothing without my counsel." But already guards moved against him, emboldened by the boy's silence. The crowd outside, hearing the commotion, pressed against the palace gates. Cries rose, "The guard! The guard!" Farid stood motionless, his vow burning within him. He had not spoken, yet his silence had shattered chains louder than thunder. Qadir fought, cursed, but at last was dragged away, his power broken. The Sultan turned to Farid. "You have no voice, yet you gave one back to my people," he said. "Tell me, boy, who are you?" Farid did not answer. He only bowed his head, his silence steady and unbroken. The people's cries outside thundered in reply. "The guard! The guard!" From that day, Farid walked the city not as a beggar but as a shield. He spoke no word, yet his silence spoke for every merchant, every child, every weary soul who had once been voiceless. The desert had chosen, and its choice endured. The city was never the same after that day. Though the Sultan remained on his throne, it was not Qadir's decrees that ruled anymore. It was the weight of silence. Farid's vow became legend, passed from stall to stall in the bazaar, whispered at night in the narrow streets. Mothers told their children, "The guard watches even without words." Merchants, once too afraid to resist, now began to push back against unfair taxes. Farmers brought grain into the city without fear, knowing the guard walked among them. Farid himself never sought reward. He still wore the same worn tunic, still slept on a mat beside his mother and sister. Yet everywhere he went, hands reached out to greet him. Gifts of bread and dates appeared at his side. When beggars tugged at his sleeve, he knelt to share whatever he had. He did not speak, but his silence carried more weight than any speech. Sometimes, at dusk, He would walk beyond the city walls into the desert. There, alone under the endless sky, he felt the presence of the old figure, not in form, but in the whisper of wind, in the shifting of dunes. The vow had bound him, but it had also freed him. He no longer chased bread or coins or fleeting comfort. He had become a shield, not just for his family, but for a people who had long forgotten hope. And yet, the vow was not without pain. There were nights when Noura begged him to tell her a story, and he could only smile in silence. Days when his mother longed to hear her son's voice but received only his steady gaze. In those moments, the weight of sacrifice pressed heavily on him. But then he would see the bazaar children laughing without fear of guards, or a merchant daring to haggle with fairness, and he knew the silence was worth it. Years passed, and the tale of the silent guard grew beyond the city. Travelers carried it to distant villages, then to caravans that crossed the desert. Some claimed he was no longer a man but a spirit, a shadow walking at the edge of storms. Others swore they had seen him, a quiet figure standing watch when cruelty threatened. His legend became larger than his flesh. Farid aged, but his eyes never lost their fire. He watched rulers rise and fall, storms of greed sweep through the land, but his silence endured. People began to say, "The guard is not one man. He is whoever carries silence as a shield." And so others took up his vow in secret, guarding their people quietly, without recognition. One evening, as the sun sank behind the dunes, Farid walked once more into the desert. His hair was streaked with gray, his body weary, but his silence still steady. He carried the bronze lamp, the carvings faint but unbroken. He climbed a dune and looked back at the city, alive, bustling, no longer bowed under fear. He knelt, digging into the sand with tired hands. Slowly, he buried the lamp once more beneath the desert. The wind rose, covering it swiftly as though the land itself had been waiting. Farid pressed his palm against the sand and closed his eyes. A warmth filled his chest, the same presence he had felt on that first day. The guard endures. When another is ready, the desert will call. When he stood, he was only a shadow against the horizon. Some say he vanished into the dunes that night, claimed by the silence he had sworn to serve. Others believe he returned to the city and lived quietly among his people until the end of his days. No one truly knows, but the lamp remains, hidden beneath shifting sands, waiting for the next soul who dares to choose between silence and betrayal. And the story of the silent guard lives on, not in words, but in the strength it left behind. If you like this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales.